everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of If Your Mouth Could Talk podcast. This is a very special one, and I'm doing this on a Zoom recording. My name is Dr. Esmaili, your host, and today I have a very, very special guest who wrote this amazing book, which I think everybody should read, Upgrading Your Vagus Nerve, Dr. Hassan Habib. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Me too. Well, first of all, Dr. Habib, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you and just knowing your work. We've spoken at several conferences together, and I know that and this is not a coincidence when you see the same speakers coming up to the same mat. I actually saw that you met Dr. Amy, Healing Trauma Accelerated. I mean, these are all just a bunch. I've been speaking at 2 other neurology conferences with her. So we're all just a bunch who are excited and eager to talk about nervous system, right?
Absolutely.
So first of all, Navas, tell us about what got you to write the second book.
Yes.
What got you to write the first book?
It's a great question. And ultimately for me, it was my own journey and it was my own curiosity. So it started off with me being curious first about the nervous system to begin with, which is, funny enough, the topic that we've been chatting about. But I was always a bit of a brain nerd and a neuro nerd. I always love kind of using those words, but it's very much who I am. And even in high school, I was very aware that I was going to have some job or some career that involved the brain and brain function within the body. And it was a lot of my own journey and learning kind of where I was, what was going on with my own health that led me in this direction. So when I graduated from chiropractic college, I weighed 250 pounds. I had high blood pressure. I was borderline diabetic. I had just met my soon-to-be wife. You know, life hit us pretty hard. There was a lot going on.
She's also a chiropractor?
Yes, she's not a chiropractor. She is a wonderful wife, wonderful mother, but she is not a chiropractor.
Okay.
But she's very interested in what I'm doing and what we're talking about because she saw my journey. And my journey was figuring out what health was, which is number one, because I don't think we in the world now have defined at a very good level what health truly is.
You speak my language. People are very familiar with disease because mainstream orthodox medicine measures it.
That's exactly
But they don't really measure health. They say how sick you are, but nobody knows what healthy looks like.
Exactly, right? And we all have a vision of what sick is, but a lot of us are actually further down that scale than we realize. And it's very much a sliding scale, right? And so for me, it was understanding that it wasn't just about not having a diagnosis, not having a disease. It had everything to do with creating optimal function within your body. And I was on this trajectory where in my 20s, I was in a really, really bad path. And I didn't realize what I was doing to myself. I realize now that it was a lot of decisions that I was making for myself that led me down this path. But it had everything to do with, let me figure out what I'm doing wrong and understand what becoming healthy truly means. I had a chance encounter with a gentleman who ends up being my wonderful mentor and guide on this initial steps of my path. His name is Sachin Patel, former chiropractor, but now very much just healer is probably the best way to put his title. And the experience and the growth and everything that I learned in my journey working with Sachin at the Living Proof Institute prepared me to learn more about what was going on here. And at the same time, my curiosity of neuro and understanding how the brain and the body connected really is what drew me to the topic of the vagus nerve, because the vagus nerve is the neurological connection between the brain and the immune system, which is located everywhere in the body. And when the vagus nerve is working, we can control inflammatory processes. We can shut down or put our immune system into a state where it can handle things and not be in a stressed fight state.
That's a really good point you brought up because when the body turns on itself, what should be a defense becomes a fight against self. That's autoimmune disorder.
That's exactly right. And so if we don't allow the vagus nerve to do the job of regulation is what the vagus nerve does. Mm-hmm. And when the vagus nerve is not able to do that job, when it's not able to regulate, the immune system goes off, it goes
So
whack.
it
And
becomes a dysregulated system.
that's exactly
Aren't you
what
amazed that that first station in our clinic that you visited today is checking for autonomic function?
Yes. Yeah.
Aren't you
So
impressed that that's
I'm
where we
honored to be
start?
here today. I'm actually sitting in one of your offices here doing this recording, and I had the most in-depth, most thorough, and most wonderful experience here at the Institute because number one, and I think this is huge for everybody to understand, safety. You need to feel safe. You need to
Yes.
feel like you are being taken care of. And I felt that today, without a doubt. I walked in, I was welcomed beautifully. I was brought in, I was given a fun 12 or some odd pages of intake form, which was wonderful. And mine is 47 pages long, but it's online.
So
And
you agree that we should take a detailed history.
a detailed history, because how else can you truly help somebody if you don't know what their past is?
You know what, Navaz, this is what I always say when people tell me I want to be healthy. Like you talked about health, you started the combo. I
Yeah,
say, okay, it's like we're your Uber driver. You're sitting in Uber and say, I want to go home. Home is healthy. Where's home for you? I don't know. Just take me home. If you don't know what healthy looks like for you, how do you
yeah.
expect your doctors to create it? Right?
On that exact point, you've mentioned now, here's where we want to go. But you also need to know where you're starting from. What's
That's
the
true.
starting point? A GPS has two inputs. It
Mhm.
needs to know where you want to go, but it also needs to know where you're starting from. And a doctor, just the same way as an Uber driver, needs to know where to pick you up from. And if they don't have that info as to what you've gone through, what journey you've been on, what challenges have happened along the way, how can you possibly support that person to get to
You need
health?
to meet them where they're at.
100%.
And that 12 page, and we're still working on it. So I
Yes.
take input because we ask from the number of birth, pre-birth.
Yes.
We want to know every nuance that has happened to you. We want to know what your symptoms that you're dealing with right now started. How does health look like? Number one thing I ask people is if your life is healthy, what does that environment look like for you? What are the things you're able to do? How would you envision yourself in that healthy space? And that gets them thinking that, oh my Lord, I never thought about this because what I'm doing right now is survival. And until somebody pound them and say, how are you today? I just made the post today. I said, how are you? Did you wake up today thinking I'm ready to take on life or just making it through another day and waiting for bedtime? Which, by the way, you never sleep fully, so you're just repeating the cycle tomorrow. Those
Exactly.
questions are not mainstream common because but that's what Orthodox medicine that you and I left have taught us is here's what disease looks like. Okay, what are the initials after your name? I'm a dentist, you're a chiropractor. You ask this set of questions. None of the questions that I ask is common in dentistry
Yeah.
or questions that you ask common in chiropractic. We want
Yeah.
to know more, but no, what they taught us is ask the questions that are relevant to you, more mainly relevant to the mouth, as if it's a separate organ or a separate system. And then these are the things you can gather. You can only take this CT, that X-ray, that you cannot do that, you cannot do that, you cannot do that. Well, if the mouth is a part of the body, then I need to know how body is doing. But that's not what we learned. Now we're reversing that. And one of the last 5 years, I wanted to have a place where people come in and I get to examine them in every level possible so that I understand, like you said, how did you end up here in my chair today?
Yeah.
Low voltage, that's one of the metrics we measure in our autonomics is voltage. And how is your sympathetic nervous system or autonomic nervous system is coping up? And where are you at? 80% functioning. Your battery runs out at 80%, which does not get you through the day. Some people, believe it or not, they're at 20% and they don't even know it until we show them those numbers and they're baffled how much those sympathetic biomarkers are running in their system. And they just know they're not feeling well. But when they see those numbers, it's like pounding in the head. I'm woken up. I know why. It's not that I didn't sleep. It's not that I can't digest food. My body's under attack. And it's all about that vagus function, vagus
Yeah.
nerve function.
Yeah.
And,
Balance, right? You mentioned this, the ANS specifically.
yep.
So for those who don't know what the vagus nerve is, let me do a quick kind of bring it together. So the vagus nerve is part of that autonomic nervous system, and it's the side of the autonomic nervous system. So all of the automatic processes that are happening within our body without our conscious requirement of control are going on within our body. So I'm not consciously thinking about digesting my lunch. I'm not consciously thinking about detoxifying my blood. I'm not consciously thinking about regulating my temperature, but all of those things are happening automatically within the body. That's the role of the autonomic nervous system. Now, we do have certain things that we have conscious control over, like we can take over conscious control of our breath. So using that, what you did and what the assessment did for me was take in this idea of, now that I'm breathing here and I'm in this situation, what's happening with my autonomic nervous system when I'm stressed a little bit, when I'm pushed in a slightly more stressful direction? Is my autonomic nervous system responding? So am I going into the vagus nerve activated rest, digest, and recover state easily, or am I stuck in a sympathetic state, which is the fight or flight side of things? And that assessment was so powerful in helping to understand what's happening, where my baseline is, and understanding which way I need to support.
Exactly. You're stuck. How do we get you unstuck?
Exactly right. So that part was huge for me. I think that was really interesting. I didn't get a chance to look at my results.
I have your CT scan here, and that's what we do. And so the process starts with just taking an overall inventory of your nervous system, autonomic nervous system. Where is it stuck at? Outside of its vagus nerve, anything outside of rest and digest, not dorsal vagal, not overwhelmed, freeze and fawn. And this is what Dr. Amy talks about. The trauma gets you stuck in a dorsal vagal, not sympathetic fight or flight, but rather stuck play dead mode, overwhelmed state, which drains the voltage so bad. It's like driving a car with a manual brake. Almost like because I love your analogy, which we're going to get to in your book. You use the same analogy as I do, like a car. We have a gas pedal and we have a brake. But when you're driving with your manual brake, like it doesn't matter which one you're operating, that car is not functioning properly and it's going to break down faster. And one thing that I noticed is when I look at patients' nervous system, they might look good on the surface, like the overall score might not look too bad. We flip it to the second page, it tells us the story of their cardiovascular health, symmetry of their body, and it gives us the overall functioning of the body charging itself, which has a lot to do with breathing, by the way, and posture of breathing. And that number is third, fourth of what it should be, which means you're working so hard to just keep your body alive. That is no life. I mean, they don't know what they're stuck in their own bodies for just breathing, standing up on 2 feet and just standing up being a human. They're spending so much energy. So there's not much left to care about other humans. Have empathy, share your gift, right? And when we take the posture pictures, it almost matches those numbers. You stand on the in-health scale. So it tells us like where the body distribution is and where you're more functioning. And then we take the posture pictures. We have another doctor, just like yourself, a brilliant chiropractor whose expertise is visual and vestibular alignment with cerebellum, basically looking at every part of the cerebellum nuclei that coordinates eyes with ears as bipedal. As we are bipedal, we have to organize our eyes and ears and mouth with all of them just so we can stand up and walk. And it's unreal how much information that he finds. It matches what we see on the CT, on the other metrics. No, we have a full picture. The questionnaire tells us where your stressors come from, where your adaptive capacity comes from. And I love how you elaborated in your book about that as well. Where are the stressors? I love how you organized it. Where is your stressors coming from? Where are you spending your capacity to adapt? The sum of the two becomes either you're in pain, stuck, or dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And health, just to bring it back to the table, health is not absence of disease. Health is a state of being able to keep up with the world and become resilient.
Yeah.
That's health. You should have stressors. We need gravity. If we didn't have gravity, we didn't have barometric pressure, we wouldn't be able to breathe.
Yeah.
When we're not able internally, neurologically, structurally, orthopedically, biochemically, CO2, pH, all of those things are not adding up for us to properly breathe against gravity, that we start deforming. Without gravity, we wouldn't be able to breathe. So the problem is not gravity, it's how we're dealing with it.
That's exactly right.
Oh, it's hard to do human.
Yeah.
The modern human has lost the ability to cope up with the stressors of the world, to cope up and become resilient. You maybe help me with the word here. What is the opposite of resilient? I guess it's maladapted state of something.
I say fragile.
Yeah, because you have nothing to
Fragility
stop it.
fragility is this thing that like you don't have that elasticity. Essentially, your body is more capable, more vulnerable of breaking down, and that's fragility. And so when you lack that ability to bounce back, because stressors are going to happen, life doesn't exist without stressors, but health is the ability to bounce back. And just to the point that you had said earlier, you mentioned that a lot of people are living in just this survival only mode, but it takes so much energy to do so. That is the opposite of ease. Ease and dis-ease are opposites.
Right.
Ease is what we're aiming for. Ease is health, that it's not hard to bounce back. It's
What
not
goes
hard
into that?
to survive.
Let's talk about what goes into ease. Ease is a state of what in terms of vagal language? Let's talk vagus nerve.
Resilience, capability. That's ultimately like when the stressor happens, if you can learn how to handle that stressor through the vagus nerve, so through your breath patterns, through your humming, chanting, gargling, singing, etc., tools that you've trained yourself with, you're essentially training through this idea of hormesis. So hormesis is teaching your body to handle positive stressors and how to bounce back from them, such that when other stressors pop up, you have that adaptive capability built in. So you go and you do a workout. A workout is a sympathetic state, right? I'm lifting weights, I'm running on the treadmill. I don't run on a treadmill, but I do biking. But I like pushing myself to a point where it's a little bit challenging, a little bit outside of that comfort zone, but then stopping, pausing, and returning back to recovered state, or teaching my body how to do so. It's the same idea of like a cold plunge. It's the same idea of getting in a sauna. You push yourself outside of your comfort zone for a short period of time, and then you teach your body how to return back to resilience. And those are vagus nerve activating opportunities. Those are resilience building opportunities.
And to your point, when you push your body to a limit and the body starts telling you something it cannot keep up with, it cannot get to meet the demand, that's diagnostic for us. Because when we give you a challenge, like when you were in the pseudomotor testing, we had patches in the bottom of your foot, which basically examines the sweat glands in response to sympathetic nervous system. So it says how you're in that state altogether. But more importantly, we give you a challenge, and that challenge was breath hold. We do Valsalva maneuver, and when we challenge the body, the true picture comes up, like that car. When you hear a rattling noise, but you don't constantly hear it, you hear it at the 70 plus speed, or you hear it when you come to a full stop, but it's not always there. What do? You take that car, take it to a road, put the pedal to metal, go to 70, 80 miles an hour, and then come a full stop. Where's the rattle coming from? When we're challenging in our bodies between those two extremes, we're seeing where does it start to fail and tremble. When I have people stand on one foot, look to the left, stimulating their senses, and challenge both of their body, and I test them against gravity and against my electric systems. That's kinesiology testing. When body starts to fail, I see when I put their feet underneath of them and I have them stand up, when they swallow, their body is stacked up against those two surfaces, their mouth, which is the top of the mouth, and the ground. Actually, this would be a good time for me to bring my skull. Don't ask me why I took it apart. I'm studying the CTs in a brand new way. So I took some parts of it so I can take a look at the motherboard.
Love it.
But here's the roof of the mouth. Here's your floor. Sorry, ground, the roof. Your entire body is stuck between where your feet meet the ground and when your lower jaw meets the upper jaw on the roof. So basically, between those two data points is your entire spine, is your airway, is your CSF, cerebrospinal fluid, blood flow, your visual sensor. You're stuck between those two.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the profession that handles the roof, my profession, has not been taught the importance of the entirety of everything. You see, that's controlling this. This is the true story. Between your neck and your mouth, that's how you're supporting the most important part of you as a human. And when our bodies have to figure out those two data points, and I challenge them after a swallow, it tells me where the sensory is not coming in, where things are stuck, and it almost always boils down to relationship of atlas to occiput. Basically, the first vertebra and the occiput right here. The orientation of those two and the fate of vagus nerve is in that neural bundle that's within millimeter of atlas.
Yeah.
And how amazing is it that finally our professions are coming together, we're pushing for that, to understand the face and the cranium, called the rock and the feather, are the most important in determining the fate of the one nerve that you wrote 2 books about. This is how we do human. Animals get chased by a tiger. They go and graze. They're hearing sounds that alert them, smell, what have you. There's a tiger, like the deer is just grazing. The tiger comes in and the deer senses that, turns on the sympathetic nervous system, which you should have full access to. Energy gets all channeled towards just driving all that force to run, not 50% effort, 100% effort, to run, fight, flight. But if that deer makes it to the safety, it's not going to sit there and ponder about that tiger. It's like, oh, great. Turn off the sympathetic, go back to grazing. Those are the primitive animals, not humans.
No.
We have a hippocampus. We have an amygdala. We have neocortex. Now the entire nervous system is bogged down by anything that alerts us into the sympathetic nervous system, whether it's being orthopedic alignment, whether it being an emotional trauma that has happened, maybe chemical concussion, physical concussion, or a mental concussion. Now memories are stuck with us.
Yes.
And until told that no longer you are in that state, you're constantly rehearsing that tiger that's going to show up. And your body's nervous system is going to get hyper geared in that state, costing you sleep. But where is the tiger? The tiger never showed up and is never going to show up. But your body is living in the state as, I'm going to stay alert. I'm not going to transition to deep stage of sleep because something bad's going to happen. That's the story of most people with insomnia, because the brain safety, it all establishes with how well is your body able to get back into ventral vagal, to rest, digest, social engagement. No wonder we see all these people that are like glazed over looks, distance from other humans. It creates them anxiety to be around the herd, which is the one thing we need. And when I give them that questionnaire that you saw, the first question is the 10 questions I ask, is pretty much summary of the first part of your book. I love it. Understanding stressors. Yes, please. Daily stressors, where are they coming from? I mean, I want an inventory from everyone. Tell me how you're doing. What do you do during the day? How do you fill your bucket back up? Psychological, physical, and biochemical stresses. Can I say thank you for beautifully put this here? And if people understand their stressors are not just mental stressors, it's not pandemic, it's not, the divorce or the company or the stock market. Those are the things that they feel like they're stressors they can deal with. Chemical stressors in your body are stressors, nutrition, lifestyle. Physical stressors are stressors. When your bucket of capacity to adapt gets to the fill, it could be that you slept wrong, or your neck got distorted and you had something bad happen at work as well. But you only understand the one and not the first. And that's what we do, is we're just trying to give some back to the adaptive capacity by understanding where the storm set up shop and down the stream, how it happened. Actually, if I may, I don't want to take over the podcast because I want you to get back to the book. But this analogy I want to use, interesting love. I used to drive a car that taught me a lot about human body. I know. And that's why I love keeping the car, because it taught me so much. So cars drive on four tires that have air. Interestingly enough, air moves a car. So does humans. Air moves us. Breathing is a movement. And we move to breathe. We compress and decompress our bodies to move cyclically, alternatively. Alternating motions kind of move us. And movement of our atlas, as we're walking, is super important for that. Anyway, or just supporting our head. So when a car with four air tires, has perfect balance between the air in those four tires, and the axles and the alternators are working as the car is driving, the battery is charging, and the steering wheel is perfectly input. So what happens if you get a nail in one of the tires, air goes down, now you have an imbalance in tires. Well, you drive that for a while, you get a check engine light or some alert from your car that says, put air in that tire, or there's a tire pressure. You go and stop by, put some air in there, turn off the engine light, and you go back to normal life until the air goes out again. Then you figure out how to change your route so you have more places where you can put air in your tire. If you continue driving that car, you only started with a tire with a nail. Now you have an alignment issue. And the steering wheel starts shaking. That's your snoring patient. That's your resistive breathing patient. You drive that car even further. That malalignment prevents the alternators to charge the battery. Now you have a battery problem as well. So you started with one problem, you have two and three, and perhaps that car that's shaking steering wheel is going to wear off the tires faster and the tire pads. So now you have that problem too. And you might get into an accident. The car is going to get damaged too. Just a single nail in the tire become 5 other problems. Now, the unfortunate part is when they come and see me, they say, oh, now I finally understand. It's my lack of nasal breathing because I have a small palate and a tongue tie. If I can just make those two better, well, if that was taken care of from the first breath, or perhaps at the minute you were formed in the womb, yes, you only had a problem with the tongue tie and a palate. But the problem is you lived with that condition for 35, 40, 50 years. And what brought you here is that you snore, can't sleep, can't digest food, have fatigue and anxiety, and your body's wearing down. No, you have that problem plus 7 other. But then the storm set up shop somewhere that's now draining you to compensate. So nonetheless, that's how I learned how the whole human body works. Well, I got a new car now. It's an electric car and brand new. A month into it, I get that light to go on that rear passenger side has low air. I'm like, dang it, is it just me and my currents? So God bless her heart, my doctor friend, Dr. Joyce said, oh, just go put some air in the tire. I'm like, you think it's that simple? Well, it's a brand new car. So I'm like, fine. So I put some air in the tire, turn off the car notice, and about 3 weeks later, the thing come back up again. Not happening. Go straight to the Volkswagen, and what they did, they took out the tires and balanced the car, and they said, there's a nail in that tire. Fix it, and and the steering wheel already started to vibrate. What I'm trying to tell you is we care more attention to our cars than we do our bodies. And unfortunately, everybody's looking for a simple answer. People, there is no simple answer. We are 11 systems working together, and there is a whole neurology, chemistry, physiology controlling the functions of all those 11 systems. And once we understand that the nervous system and autonomic nervous system, to be exact, is in charge, we stop chasing down the symptoms. With that said, Doctor, I love your car analogy, by the way. You and I see things from the same angle. I made a couple of notes in here that I want to just have you talk about. I even make notes in your book.
I'd love to just kind of interject one thing. You mentioned that the nail in the tire was what needed to be determined, right? And what unfortunately is happening in conventional medicine and the way that allopathic care is being provided primarily is they're just filling the tire.
That's
right?
it.
Or they're putting a Band-Aid over it and saying, now the issue is fixed.
They might just use the tire pads, but that's about it.
Exactly, right? Or we're just changing the tire altogether and cutting it out. And that's a whole nother issue. But ultimately, it comes down to the importance of identifying the root cause or the root causes. And when it comes to health, there's multiple root causes for every single disease state or every single person who's experiencing these disease states. And so it just points to that's why you have a long intake form. That's why it takes time to sit with the patient and hear their story and understand their emotions and their experiences that are driving them into the situation that they're experiencing. And so it really comes down to, if we want to practice good medicine, we have to change our paradigm as practitioners, and the patients need to become aware that it takes time to identify what those root causes are so that the changes can be made. Because once you start removing those nails and patching those tires, and you do it effectively and you do it in a patterned way, then you can respond with the car driving perfectly. In the same way, the health comes back, the ease comes back, but it can't happen if you're just doing
I'm so glad
8-minute
you mentioned that
appointments.
because, as you saw, as elaborate as our record taking is, and you haven't gone through half of it, it's a whole half a day process. And we don't leave no stones unturned. And we have 4 different providers from different angles examine the nervous system orthopedically. We actually have a whole round to address that. And also, the anatomy, the correlation of the mouth to the rest of the body for functioning. But one thing is for sure, you're not going to go directly into treatment. Once you have your report of findings, we identify our working diagnosis. We have our phase 1. 80% of the phase 1 is still a part of diagnostics. We don't even know until we simulate the least invasive part, which is basically reversible. If your body says no, we can reverse it. We didn't cut your septum. We didn't cut your tongue tie. We just put a block in your mouth and we give you 2 exercises to do. Is your nervous system metrics from baseline improving to this way or going backwards? If your body gets more blocked, we're not going to change anything further until we know where your body wants to move. If your body has body has figured out how to compensate and be well. That's called the state of allostasis, not homeostasis. It's to be okay with not being okay. It's like when we had the pandemic happen. That was a stress on our society. We thought it's going to be gone for 2 weeks, but it lasted 2 years. What happened in that 2 years? The state of a emergency became a norm. I remember we used to call it a new norm, meaning now we learn to live as a society with a heightened state of being around other people. Just one example.
All the time. Yeah.
That's an allostasis for the body of society. It's the same thing. When a stressor comes in and doesn't leave, brain first starts to avoid it. If there's a nociception, if there's triggering for the brain, let's avoid it. I'm going to shift myself away from it physically. When it becomes more than that, 6 months, a year later, still there, that disaffrontation becomes now a signal that annoys the brain. So what does the brain do? I'm going to silence it, use my neurotransmitters to completely shut it off. Like imagine your health being like your beautiful kitchen functioning, the floors are perfect, and you have this thing called the sink, which you use for faucet, kind of water comes in and it drains. That's your adaptive capacity. Small sink, little adaptive capacity, bigger sink, bigger adaptive capacity. Now, if your sink is plugged and your faucet is running too fast and it's small to begin with, you have water all over the place. Modern medicine right now comes in and says, let's mop it. Let's just change the floors till we run out of doing that. In functional medicine, for the most part, I know they're great people, but they're focused on physiology and hormones purely in a sense that that's not the only reason why somebody has HPA axis over sympathetic overdrive. Maybe the driver was in fact an orthopedic malalignment, but we are not looking for that because all we have is peptides and hormones and supplements, right? It's like, let's do a better job in mopping. When I come in and say, let's go ahead and remove that kink from the sink, wherever it's plugged, shut down that faucet that's running and then mop. Now, in the meantime, a body will use, let's say your kids will go and bring sheets from the bedroom, towels and everything to mop the floors. Now you have problems sleeping because you use your bed sheets for mopping the floor. That's neurotransmitters that body use that needs, like serotonin, for example, needed for melatonin, become methylized to melatonin for sleep cycle and sleep maintenance transition. When your body is overusing serotonin, it's now depleted of what it needs to get you to sleep, so you can't sleep. Kind of similar to that same path. Wouldn't it be lovely if the reason why body has to go to that second, tertiary, fourth level of compensation is addressed, so it doesn't have to overcompensate. The cortisol goes up. Now, what do? We'll chase down the cortisol overdrive symptoms. But why did the body up the production of cortisol? Well, when we asking those questions, it's never a simple answer. When histamine comes, like now everybody's in a first name basis with MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome. It's like, okay, it's got to be that. All right, histamine is another reason. Methylation, like everybody talking about MTHFR. People, those are all down the stream ways of body's compensation. Totally. We can nitpick at all of those, but until we get to the top of the tree, like those are low hanging fruit reasons for why somebody is in overdrive with their sympathetic is dysregulated. When we're looking at the human body from every possible angle, you and I agree, you could have, just an example, somebody could be in a car accident and lose a loved one and injure their hip. The emotional trauma, the emotional concussion, and that physical hurt to the body, they're both there. And the chemical, mechanical concussion, physical concussion, and emotional concussion both happen. But do we pay attention enough to the mental state? Not that I know of. Like a lot of people thinking personality disorders. I mean, the other day I made a post about how many of those magazines are now at the checkout line in grocery store: ADHD, anxiety, Alzheimer's, mental health disorder. I mean, unreal how we are making this now a new norm. Everybody is ADHD, autistic, like things are inflated, and now it's like normal. Oh, I've heard it, I've seen it. Just like the crooked teeth at one point were, and still are. Every kid needs a brace. But wait. In 200 years, we just stopped growing mouth enough to accommodate 32 teeth that we have to take out 4 to 8 of them out of there just to get them straight. Why is that? And nobody asking those questions. It's just medicine's telling us what to do, and we're following that. Wrong or right, I think the practice in itself, if you just take it out of context and say, this is what they're doing, like treating diabetes with GLP-1, is it wrong? It's a miracle drug for some. But the fact is, where did diabetes come from? Why do people have diabetes? Why do they have insulin sensitivity issue? If you're not talking about lifestyles, we have to constantly medicate it. If you're not shutting down the faucet, removing the kink, we constantly have to mop. You and I were tired of mopping. It's been a tough road for me. I don't know about you, but getting to where we are now.
That's what got me out of my practice. Literally, I was tired of seeing the same patients every week, doing the exact same thing with them every week, just so they could get through the next 5-6 days without physical pain. So I was doing acupuncture, I was doing electrotherapy, I was utilizing heat therapy and cold and electrical devices and adjustments and soft tissue therapy, and they were all coming back, and I wasn't healing them. There wasn't an understanding that we're trying to identify why, and we're digging as deep as possible, and it just wasn't there. So I was so tired of it that I ended up selling that practice and going into a functional medicine practice with Sachin. And that's where I learned. I had such amazing benefits from that.
Awakening.
It was a complete awakening, right? It was those red pill moments that I finally figured out what was truly underlying. And it led me to that thing that I was so passionate about, so curious about, which was the vagus nerve. And so that's really like how these two worlds came together, that it was the frustration of being that mopping guy, cleaning up all of these messes, but not actually figuring out or supporting the patients as to why they were dealing with this overflowing sink all the time in the first place.
And that is a question that cost me a lot of money too, because I got out of dentistry. It was not an easy transition. It was exactly during pandemic. I had about 3 months that the world didn't expect me to perform anymore. And the life came to a full stop. 400-yard skid mark, U-turn, not going back to fixing teeth. And surprisingly, it was the 10-year mark for me. And at 10 years of practicing dentistry, I asked the same question. If this was supposed to help people, I'm not helping anyone. I'm constantly just repairing teeth. And I asked the question, why do they break the same tooth again and again and again? Why do they have 2 sides to their mouth? Why are they just using one side? Why can't they chew on the other side half the time? Well, now that I know that in what I learned in dental school was just this pearly whites. And this is what I'm uber passionate about is, part of the dentistry that never made sense to me. And my goal was to be a TMJ expert. And I used air quote because there is no TMJ expert. Okay. There is not. Because jaw joint is the hinge. It's such a fascinating system because we are bipedal. All other animals, they have sensation of the ground. Even gorillas, they're not on 2, they're on 4. They don't walk with their 2 feet. We are on 2. Those are 3 traits that makes us human. We stand on 2 feet. We grow our neocortex and produce brain waves, and we can discern. We have this gift of discernment, critical thinking that is exclusive human trait because we can grow our neocortex. But that does not come at a cost, because we have to grow our brain on top of 2 feet while we speak, also a human trait, which means the space that's shared between all these structures need to have a 90-degree sharp angle to accommodate our pharynx below the palate for speaking, which means as we think, we speak, our faces grow in the proper direction. As we walk, again, walking, thinking, speaking, our neocortex grows and our body's bilateral sensation grows. Mouth directs all of that. And the mouth grows in development is the continuation of development of that, because the most important nerve, cranial nerve, after vagus nerve, that develops all of this, the trigeminal, down to this structure. But the problem is this only is a part of the story because there are teeth sitting on it. Lower jaw is not a part of the system. As a matter of fact, it's just hanging from it. Lower jaw is the fudge factor between our head and our bodies, literally, just like the cervical spine atlas. So we don't have this pearly whites at birth. And look, if I were to put this together here, ooh, there's teeth, and now it's malocclusion. There's connection in here, okay? So teeth come into the equation to bring mandible to closure, which means we needed mandible to do a lot of things. One of them is to orient our head to 3 dimensions for accommodating sensation of our ear and eyes, to see left and right, because you know as well as I do, your brain does not see anything. Your brain gathers information from hardware. 3% of what we think we see is gathered from our eyes. The rest, brain puts it together. It's a perception.
Vestibular, interoception,
absolutely,
inside and the outside, the combination of all sensations.
Yes, and an inability to coordinate left and right creates anxiety, heightened state of senses. We get so wired up to the senses, and you know what the state of sympathetic nervous system does? It gets us so heightened with our senses, we're wired more alert. That's what when there's prey, again, we're not giving it 50%, we're giving it 100%. So our senses become hyper geared at all times. Well, there is no tiger again in this picture. It's just that you have a twisted cranium, the 2 eyes, and because your maxilla, which is floor of this, is uneven, and the 2 eyes are not agreeing with both ears, with the position of the mouth, with the feet, to tell the brain the same story. That creates anxiety internally, interoception. And now the brain basically cannot avoid, cannot accommodate, cannot mask. It will turn everything to the state of hyperactive nervous system. I have to believe we have a precursor for all these other conditions that are becoming disease of neurodegenerations, because when nervous system neuroplasticity changes to the level of allostasis and pain, then all brain knows is pain. Is not proprioception, it's nociception. And nociception becomes, look around you. All this chronic diseases. Yes. Which we
become familiar with unhealthy being familiar. Right?
Yes.
Unhealthy becomes familiar. And so making the habitual changes and the lifestyle changes actually become more challenging for people because it's unfamiliar and it almost becomes feared. And this is amygdala retraining that we need to try to do for our patients, is understand that, you know what? Your head is slightly tilted, but that's your norm, and that's not good, right? We need to change the norm. We need to refamiliarize you with where healthy actually stands. And so that's where a lot of the work that you're doing here at the clinic is built on, is let's recreate and re-acknowledge where that familiarity is, kind of how we can rebuild that, or rebuild healthy as familiar, because that's the key to actual changes finally taking place.
Because if you're not addressing the totality of the system, we have to constantly mask the next shoe that drops, the next breaker that goes off with medications.
Exactly. And that's why you go on one medication, then 2, then 3, and then you're taking medications to counteract the side effects of other medications. And
I love what you wrote here, and I took a note because I want to make sure we mention it here. You mentioned chronic lifestyle disease. Wow. I could have not better said it myself, because I know the chronic disease state, it is the new norm. We don't know what ease is. We're all stuck at some level or another in the spectrum of chronic disease. Our bodies are spending way more than we have ability to adapt. Yeah. And the sum of the two becomes the state of your being. not able to function on autopilot, when the frontal cortex becomes involved, that, hey, that check engine light that's always on, something is off. I don't have what it takes to cope up, because we have a heightened state of sympathetic, which comes with all kinds of, side effects. So firefighters, for example, when there's 911 call, is that fight or flight response from the hypothalamus that is connected to our autonomic nervous systems, that turns in signal of fight or flight into hormones that goes to proper organs to do what they're supposed to do: shut down, rest, and digest, activate what we need to save our life. And those biomarkers, those inflammatory biomarkers, it's like the firefighter that shows up at your house. When the firefighter shows up, they do what they're meant to do: hose down your house. Now, if there was a true fire, thank you very much for doing that, because you saved my house. But if there's only a popcorn smoke and there's no fire, and they show up every night, every day, all the time, hosing down your house, now you have mold toxicity, mold sensitivity, you have digestive issues. Like, yes, because they're hosing down your house every night for no absolute fire. The actual trigger is not there to be responded to, but the trigger is there, the inflammation.
This is literally the analogy that I use. So when I'm doing my talks all around, usually the US, but all over the world, and I'm talking about how the vagus nerve controls inflammation, is by regulating these immune cells. And these immune cells can go into, and I'm talking specifically about tissue-resident macrophages. These are these important immune cells that are there from initially when we are conceived. So the first cells to differentiate from stem cells are these macrophages. They're part of the innate immune system. And they then go and align with the somites, where each organ is then going to be produced. And those cells remain in those organs, regulating their function for the entirety of your life. They're called tissue-resident macrophages, and they have different names in different organs. In the brain, they're called microglial cells. In the liver, they're called Kupffer cells. In the bones, they're called osteoclasts. There's so many different names for them. Regardless, they all have this same job. They're constantly monitoring what's happening. Now, when there is a stressor, when there is a push, some sort of vulnerability is identified, those cells shift into a state called M1, which is firefighter state. It's immune fight state. And we need that. We need immune fight state. When there's a fire, you need firefighters, period. End of story. But when the fire is gone, you no longer need the firefighters. You need to shift those firefighters, get rid of them, and call in the recovery crew, the repairmen, the carpenters, the drywallers, the regulatory staff. That's the M2 state of these macrophages. And so there's this line that's being drawn now between how do you get rid of those firefighters and turn them into these regulatory cells. And the answer to this is through the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve signals acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter that turns an M1 macrophage, a firefighter, into a regulatory macrophage. It tells it, guess what? The fire is gone. You can now shift into state where you can rebuild. And this is the ultimate key and the overarching reason why I wrote all 2 books and everything that I've done. We cannot heal when we're stuck in a sympathetic M1 activated state. We need the vagus nerve to turn on, to send that acetylcholine signal out to those cells and turn those macrophages from firefighters to repairmen. We cannot heal when we're stuck in fight or flight, period.
For good reason, because what are the functions that happens when we're in Vegas? When the vagus nerve is functioning properly.
Well, our heart rate is regulated, our body temperature is regulated, we're digesting food, we're breaking down food and bringing these things in. And you mentioned earlier that, when you're in a fight or flight state, the firefighters themselves, the actual firefighters, go into that sympathetic state. They shut off digestion. We don't need to worry about getting nutrients in right now. We don't need to worry about getting foods in.
Or reproduction, for that matter.
Reproduction, absolutely. We're not thinking about that at that moment. Right now is a moment about survival. And if you're constantly in a survival mode, healing can never truly happen. You cannot.
And the normal stressors in life that you mentioned come in, and then you cannot keep up with it because you're Exactly. You already are overload. So like I said, a normal trace of mold that does not make other people sensitive, you, without a vagus nerve functioning, will be sensitive to. In one family, only one person. Don't test the house, test a person. And mold and heavy metal toxicity is the number one thing that I see. Obviously, our world is becoming more toxic. Our food, environment, water, air, just about everything. The world, emotionally speaking, just the influx of information coming at our brain, just about everything in the modern life is meant to deplete us of the way our normal body functions, which needs flow, needs ground, needs air, needs sunshine, and it's overloaded with toxicity loads. So the balance is tipped more towards imbalance just by virtue of being born as a normal human in a modern world. Your senses are already hyper geared towards, because we're getting, instead of rest and digest and develop normally, we're getting stressors that we cannot handle. Children are basically stuck in a brainstem in a state of survival, way younger and younger. I mean, thinking about the amount of time they spend in the car seat, the activities around them that basically does not allow their nervous system sensory to become more motor, to turn their head, just know how to deal, how to sense the environment, what is inside of me. The tongue tells them majority of our senses that comes from the inside of our body is geared to the tongue. As a matter of fact, those are 5 first cranial nerves that forms in the womb are the survival ones. Vagus nerve is one of them. And when there is a stressors in the amniotic fluid, ask how we know. They actually studied placenta of mothers, and they found over 70 chemicals in head plastic.
More. I think it even, the most recent one that I heard from the placental blood was around 230 some odd toxins.
Basically, this child in the amniotic fluid, the genetic, as it is forming, is signaling to form them in response to a stressor. And the genes that get turned on, I mean, why do you have so much MTHFR? Could it have something to do with the nutrition that they're getting in the womb? That this is not truly genetic, but rather an epigenetic, because our DNA can express itself in response to the stressors. Wow.
Yeah, and generational trauma actually transfers via epigenetic.
We're not even, like I said, we're just
maternal stress literally goes and affects the genetic activation of certain genes in the baby, in the fetus. And that's taken on for 2, 3, 4 generations following. This has been purely studied and very clearly.
Actually, so glad you mentioned this, because in the world of craniofacial that I'm the expert in, we're thinking that there was a time cleft palate was pretty common, especially in the areas of the world where nutrition was a problem. Our cleft palate is tongue tie. But let me tell you, there's this one gene, I'm going to nerd out for a second, called SHH. And within the first 2 weeks of gestation, as the neural tube forms, and then the migration of all the cells that differentiate into different parts of the human, one of the initial part of our entire being is formed. And at birth, it's pretty much to a completion is our head. The rest of our body, especially like legs and pelvis, kind of come later. So head forms first. And the first part of the entire face and the cranium that forms is palate. And tongue is one of the first muscles that forms it. Now, that's within 2 weeks of gestation. Now, imagine this. The mom doesn't even know she's pregnant. So if mom has increased oxidative stress from preeclampsia, breathing disorder, diabetes, that stress that mom is introducing to the mix will prevent this gene from turning on, which aids with migration of the cells to form the face. So let me get this straight. Because mom is straight, your face is not formed properly. Correct. Wow. But can we affect the next generation in the womb? Get a hold of the mom. If mom's habits change, if moms can sleep better, if their nervous system regulated before they get pregnant during those child-rearing years, I wholeheartedly believe the direction we're going to take with health is going to completely redefine itself, because what you and I are so passionate about, and I know a lot of people that we speak at their conferences or speak with at conferences, they all are beating on the same drum. It's all about what's between your 2 ears. And when you're in survival, down the stream, everything is gonna suffer. There's only one thing that the brain knows: how to survive. And the one way I know, and you and I both have seen it and done it, that it puts that picture for the world is how you breathe. Your breathing matches the state of mind that you're in. And until the state of mind changes to social engagement, your breath will never change, no matter how much we tape your mouth, how many surgeries your nose you get, how much expansion in your palate you get, until your nervous system state changes to rest, digest, vagal function. Your breath will match that state. Your CO2 will have to, like, all of those are secondary to where your brain is perceiving you to be. So you breathe to match the state of your nervous system. So yeah, fascinating.
I would love to hear your take on how structure affects autonomic state, right? And how palate functionality, palate formation, what my results were on my CT. I would love to kind of hear about kind of some of
This is
these.
funny because I love taking a full CT scan, but before even I take a look at bring your CT up. This is the part where I'm completely 100% passionate about, is what most people call it face reading. And what I do is basically looking at someone's face, and I'll be like, let me freak you out right now. If I have you stand on one foot and tell you where to ground yourself, this is where you ground. And if I tell you which side of your face and your body you cannot breathe out of, almost 100% of the time I'm correct. So based on what I'm seeing on your CT and just the way you're holding your head over here, I look at your face straight. For the simplicity of go ahead and raise your right hand, because I want to make sure we're not in the mirror. That's your right hand. Okay. This is my right. So your eye and your mouth on both on the right is down. And when smile is because you can't want to see your teeth. There you go. So the right side of your mouth and your teeth is down. And I'm looking at your nose and your chin going opposite direction. That means there's a twist between your skull and your neck and your lower jaw. So the two don't agree, which means when you put your teeth together, the place your mandible want to hang out is going to be different than the place, and you have a crossbite there. Exactly, that front crossbite. What does that mean? Meaning this thing called the occlusal suture. Right here. This is what dentistry only taught me this. And that was like really advanced dentistry. They said, oh, look at you looking at the arch instead of the teeth. Well, the supporting structure of the mouth is the rest of the body. So I really learned that part, but let's just, for the simplicity of this is your occlusal suture. You have sutures in your head, which this all came unglued. You see how you have sutures between all these different colorful bones? This is also another suture. The difference is the proprioception that goes from the periodontal ligaments of those pearly whites to your brain, goes straight to the mesencephalic nucleus, not to the brainstem. All the other proprioceptions have to go through the brainstem, the spinal cord, but the ones from the teeth go straight to the brain because it's super important. And our brain is heavily wired to our mouth, and it's for a good reason, which is why it's not completely done forming at birth. As we become more sophisticated in our motor movements, the mouth develops. So if the function is missing, the mouth doesn't develop. And if the mouth is the limiting factor, or the position of the tongue is the limiting factor, then the functions don't develop. It's like form follows function, dysfunction causes deformity. When I'm looking at your face in here, and I see the way that you're supporting your head is kind of like counterclockwise. Okay. That means if I have you stand up, you have no problem standing on one foot on the right side. You cannot do that on the left side, which means your brain does not know how to coordinate your ears and eyes to the left. If I give you two stimulation on the left side, like a snap, and I have you turn your eye and stand on the left foot and put your teeth together, you will fall. You can't. So when you're walking and you come up to a challenging time where you have to stand on that foot, you lose balance. Well, underneath of that is your neck, and underneath of that is your ribcage and your pelvis. So your pelvis also is malaligned, which most likely, from what I'm seeing here, if that's the case, you have a left pelvis malalignment. The orientation of the pelvis is back, which means when you're walking, the pelvis does not move in the proper way to propel you through space, moving the spinal fluid, all that jazz. So
it's interesting you say that, because the chiro assessment that I did have pointed out left-sided SI.
There you go. All I had to do is look at your face, and I knew that you have a left SI joint instability, which means when I stand you up to get you balanced, your mouth needs to be balanced on the right side in the proper amount between your teeth, just so we can work up your spine, because you have 32 vertebrae in your spine. You have 32 vertebrae in your mouth. The mouth, the top and lower jaw coming together, their signals is basically the same rule that applies to chiropractor. Spinal coupling is left and right mouth. Your mouth and your neck are direct, two sides of the same coin. This is where I get really passionate, because what an orthopedist dentist like me can do with the properly trained chiropractor that is focused on neurology and is focused on function and takes the whole body to the account, we're treating chronic diseases, Navas, that you have no idea how many of those symptoms drop down and the chronic disease just poof to the thin air, just because we got the malocclusion in the neck and the mouth to resolve, and the body organize itself. All those vertebrae in between are organized, and also the spinal fluid is free to move to the head and clear the toxins from the brain, to get the blood to the brain and be a human and get to that vagal tone. So to bring you, it's a long-winded answer to your question. How does the mouth fit into that? Well, mouth is a huge part.
We have the pharyngeal and laryngeal branches of vagus nerve as well,
yes,
that are driving our ability to regulate our speech and our airway capabilities, which are, it's literally everything is linked right up together.
So this atlas wasn't made for this occiput. This is the back of the skull, right? Here's how the atlas kind of supports. So we're not even talking like birth traumas and what have you, the unevenness of the two condyles, but just hear me for a second. And this is where you support your head in the back. Before you had teeth, you had this. This was always there. The teeth came into the equation later, which is why we don't walk at first. We walk as in propel on 2 feet. When the full dentition comes into the account, at about 2 to 3, the kids are able to walk and propel and then turn their neck and do all those jazz on 2 feet. They do walk, but they're not walking. They're not really propelling through space. If there's any malocclusion here from birth trauma, formation, whatever, and the tailbone orientation is not proper because they don't have the secondary curves formed because they never really left that head extension because they never actually crawled, and they spend way too much time in the flexion state in the car seats, and so the curvature in the neck is lacking. Now they stand on 2 feet, and the first point of contact sets off the mouth to be formed in malocclusion. Malocclusion is a body decay. Malocclusion in the mouth is a malocclusion in the cervical spine, in the ischial seats. The acetabulum of the and the femur is the malocclusion of the feet to the ground. Body actually forces, when body comes in contact with gravity, all that force kind of gets through our body. And the only other point of contact is the mouth. So when I look at your face, I can show you right here. I'm going to pull up your CT in just a second. But the fact of the matter is, your face is a product of your body. When I'm looking at your face and the way you talk, and I have people talk as they're talking, I see where the mandible goes. Mandible, for saying those double phonetic sounds, have to move proper in response to the neck. So if you have a twisted neck, your mandible has to move with it to the proper position to get the double sound words out. Because if that's where you're perceiving best airway as in like phonetic space, the space, hollow space inside of you, that position may not be in the center where your vagus nerve is free to function. That would twist that neural bundle in position of our first bone, atlas. So atlas follows the head wherever it goes, and mandible is a huge part of that, which is why I started by saying this is not a bone that should be on the responsibility of dentist alone. This is why, Dr. Habib, why I have 4 different professionals to help me position this one bone into physiological position so I can match the skull to it. It is profoundly simple, yet it's beautifully complex. And if you appreciate the complexity of this puzzle, once we have defined the borders and corners of this puzzle, and we see the big picture, then we're not biased about the little pieces we're trying to jam together. If I don't know how to put this skull together, if I don't know this is a vomer and this is an ethmoid, and I would just try to fit it however I think is best. That doesn't necessarily mean that's how it should be put together. Once we appreciate what it was supposed to be, we don't call things a new norm anymore. There is no new norm. It's all a new state of dysfunction that we're normalizing and medicating. Because if all kids are allergic to everything under the sun, if all kids have malocclusion, if all kids have forward head posture, if they all have ADHD, that's not normal. We're normalizing it. It's not.
On that topic, I want to ask you a really important question. I'm seeing so many kids, including mine, that have shark teeth. This idea of their adult teeth coming in behind their kids, their child teeth, their baby teeth, and the overcrowding that's following with that, the inability of these child's teeth or baby teeth to come out at the right time. And you go to the dentist, the regular dentist, and they're like, it's really normal. It's common now. This is the thing.
I see it every day.
No big deal. And I have to ask this question because I'm frustrated hearing this from my own kid. So tell me what causes this and where this is coming from. It's not a lack of carrots.
Uh,
What's happening?
it's combination of things. You're right. The work of Weston Price was an eye-opening for most because, and also breath. James Nestor talked about soft food as one of the drivers of lack of mouth function, lack of nasal breathing. Yes, it's good start. But if Weston Price was in the modern world right now, like I am, like you are, repeating the same work, there's more than just the soft food that happened to those kids that went from the tribes to the city. Those kids also had a lot of other things. Let me just give you a few examples. Those are kids that don't speak and articulate. Remember I said one of our traits as a human that helps us function and grow our faces speaking? How many of these kids actually use words? They're groaning. Literally they're going back to the state of just groaning like animals. I jokingly say about 10, 20 years from now, I don't even know that we understand each other anymore because they're not words used. Everything is just is abbreviations and texting, and really that one function that makes us humans is speaking from our throat. Discerning right and wrong for our own self, discernment, critical thinking that requires a new cortex, and speaking those thoughts. Those two traits are being shrunk so much because everything is so automated. So another thing, again, going back to Weston Price, those kids spend a lot of time in car seats. They sit in those little jumping, we put them in the jumpers where their feet touch the ground in an erect posture.
The jolly
They haven't even rolled over, okay, at 3 months. Loading their spine at the wrong end without the proper curvature. They haven't crawled, they haven't been prepared sensory wise. And then extended amount of time in front of those devices, because what iPads do and those two-dimensional stimulations, get their finger and moving things on a 2 dimension. They're hearing sounds and moving objects, but they don't have discernment of left and right cerebellum. So what happens is this kid's neocortex is growing. It's getting stimulation before they have the proper support, proper hierarchy of the brain development, brainstem, midbrain to the cortex. Heads are bubbling, faces are shrinking. Lack of soft food and tongue posture, I agree with you, is one thing. Overactive system, sympathetic nervous system from indoor living, all of that aside. Just the fact that they're not speaking, chewing, all those functions that's required to their face are lacking. So Weston Price work was great, but that was just the start. Where there is an observant clinician like you and me who take the red pill, drink the Kool-Aid and say, I don't believe in that. I don't believe that answer to everything is surgery and medication. We fall into the world that there has to be a better way to do this. And that better way involves understanding how internally you're stuck in that survival mode. And going back to a question, why the crowded teeth? Because one of the areas of development of our face that is basically the scaffolding of holding our eyes and our nervous system, basically all of the functionality of our nervous system in our face comes from somewhere or another surrounding the eyes. Eyes are very important. The upper jaw is the floor of that, and also the floor of the nose. So this arch, for it to form properly, to accommodate all the teeth in the right order, requires to be moving in this direction, laterally in this direction, practically in 6 dimension, properly in the right order. So that means if there's any hindrance, obstruction, or restriction, tether tissue that needs to be moving, that needs to be addressed. And everybody looks at tongue tie and it becoming such a household name. Wonderful. I'm glad we're seeing the tip of the iceberg. Can we just take a look at the bottom of the iceberg for a second? Okay, because the tongue, when it was formed in the embryo, it's connected to the fascia in the neck, to right here, to the rib cage, to the diaphragm, and all the other organs. So let me get this straight. If your organs have not descended all the way properly, there's tightness in those organs. It could be kidneys, it could be your small intestines, your diaphragm is stuck. All of that is connected to the fascia of the tongue. So if tongue is not properly moving and the organ's tightness, the fascial tightness is all the way extended to those, can we just cut the tie and call it good? You understand it's not, because the body is connected as a whole. Unfortunately, I only can accept simplicity when we acknowledge complexity first. Yeah. When we are trying to simplify a complex system by breaking it down reductionistically, breaking it down to little parts, we lose the sight of the fact that the part that we just disassembled as a part of a whole. So we cannot bring this one finger and say function as yourself. We studied this one finger and everything there is about this one finger. Like I learned in TMJ world, we study the position of this is temporal bone, the fossa, right? This is there's another temporal bone here. This is your fossa.
Yeah.
Condyle, ball and a socket, right? We studied everything about the position of this down to the quarter of millimeters and how to adjust the occlusion to get this space right. You know what I learned the last 3 years? This bone moves a lot more than this. Wait, what? So to give you an example, if we were carpentry work, that's what I learned to do in mainstream dentistry, getting the doors, locks in the door to line up, right? That's what we're trying to do when we're trying to balance the occlusion and get you the right bite, orthodontically lining the teeth at question, you have malocclusion. The problem is the door locks are sitting in the door frame, and the door frame has door hinges, and they're sitting on top of a building. So if your building is off, your door frame is off, the hinges are off, the locks are off too. So when a carpenter shows up, I'm talking about the mainstream dentistry I learned, to treat the teeth irrelevant of the position of the head on top of the body. It's trying to get the teeth to independently organize themselves in a beautiful setting. Because what really happens, this is the name of this podcast, If Your Mouth Could Talk. The fact of the matter is when all else is malaligned, the mouth is the part that forms the last to lock us in that system. When we have a beautifully functioning nervous system, let me tell you a story. When we have a beautifully functioning nervous system in dorsal vagal, full access to sympathetic, can call the 911 if it needs to, but it's not functioning there. It's not stuck in that dorsal vagal either. It's not overwhelmed. It's not stuck in fight or flight. It's in rest and digest with full access to all branches, should it need to. That nervous system develops a human that's standing on 2 feet, is able to articulate, grows the brain, has a functioning cerebellum, is not stuck in the brainstem, can get the sensory information, process motor, speak, chew, talk to other humans, propel through space, examine the horizon, and share their gift with the world. That body produces a beautiful smile that has a proper proportionate to the rest of the face and is appealing. When you look at someone with that mouth, you know what you're thinking? This is someone with a functioning nervous system, which is why we're attracted to someone with beautiful smile, right? Beautiful faces function. Now, what happens if the body is out of order? Things are not functioning and they are stuck in a dorsal vagal or fight or flight, either physiologically, mentally, chemically, whatever the reason is, and their body's nervous system is less than optimal. That body cannot functionally produce a beautiful smile and a beautiful face in proportionate, because the upper and lower jaw produce the most important part of the most functional part of you, which is your mouth. If that mouth is not in a proper order, you know what you end up with? Crooked teeth, retruded jaw, retruded face, flat cheekbones, and not unattractive, but less than optimal face. You say, people come to see me when I was a dentist, I want straight teeth because I'm aging, I want just beautiful teeth. What they're subliminally telling me, the nervous system knows this is the problem. That's why they come see the dentist first, not the chiropractor. Because when all else fail, this will tell the story. Mm-hmm. And instead of decoding that story, I used to create the illusion of a nervous system that would have been functional, which never holds because the building is not working. I cannot get the locks to stay that way. And that's when I started examining my own work after 10 years and saying, if I cannot get them better, that means this is not an independent system. And now I know we are attracted to a beautiful smile, but that beautiful smile needs to represent a functioning system with a full functioning nervous system that's in vagal tone. And now my work is all in an attempt to restore that. And the metric that I use is the breath. Nervous system and the breath is what I use. And wherever you're stuck, we're going to have to find it. And I don't know where that is. But guess what? It's a work, it's a collaboration between the team and the patient. Okay. We're allies with them like we are with you right now. And I hope that I was able to answer the question, but it's one of those things that this is why I created a whole podcast and I bring so many guests and patients to the podcast, because what you asked is, what is the mouth? Why does the mouth deform?
What is the mouth telling me?
It tells the whole story. When the mouth, and orthopedically alone, this is a great segue because I'm going to share my window. Here you are. I rendered your volume. I'm going to go ahead and bring the soft tissue back and turn you around. And I actually have your airway too, by the way. So I'm going to go ahead and take the bone away for the time being, and that's your airway, okay? So you see how this is a smack in the middle of your face. So your nose is shifted to the left side. So your face is there's asymmetry in the face, which all the functionality of the other structures, your eyes and ears, are pretty much off. Before even I touch you, and I'm glad that Dr. Shar has done an evaluation on you, I told you that you have a left side problem with your pelvis. Boom, your face told me that. Because let's go to this volume here. I usually take a full CT, but the machine you have today is unable to take that anyway. When I look at your vestibular system, this is the part that never sleeps, that orients you to the 3D. It's the sensory part, like the airplane. The airplane has wings that kind of gets it off to go on the air. Our head, when we take off, right? We take off the floor and we become bipedal. At about 2 years old, kids are able to fully walk without falling down. They can control their mouth is really helping to orient the head is when this all comes together. So the story that your vestibular system, the saccules in this direction, and Dr. Ryan taught me all these terms, which is really cool. Saccules, and I forgot the other sensors that move your head in the lateral, horizontal, and vertical. Yeah. So as your head moves in lateral and horizontal, the coordination, the cilia inside the semicircular canals can orient or signals the brain in what dimensions it can safely move into or not, which has a lot to do with the orientation of temporal bones. When I look at your face and I see that I can superimpose them together, so I can see your hard tissue and soft tissue together. Okay, there you go. So I'm going to make the bone a lot more. So here's your bony structure underneath. When I look at the temporal bone, which is the most important in my world, my entire goal is to level the temporal bones and all the structures in the face, the back and the front. That's pretty much the driver. And in between all of that is our friend sphenoid, which is the balancer. Even 1 millimeter, this bone being outside the center of gravity, wherever the perception of reality is for you, will wreak havoc in the nervous system structure, because practically all the cranial bones that control our sensory information, one way or another, about 80% of them traverse, 92% of them traverse between sphenoid and the two temporal bones. How amazing is that? So minor distortions in position of the sphenoid, which is directly in your face, it's going to cause a lot of problems with the nervous system. And I look at the position of the eyes. The story your body tells you, you get majority of that from the right eye. The right eye is dominant. So the dominance of the right eye, right foot, right hand makes your left brain dominant, which means basically the side that you breathe out of does the left side, not much the right side. There you go.
You're absolutely on point. And like, I know that I have a deviated septum, and I know that I breathe through my left very well. My right side. You
cannot breathe out of your right nostril. How did I know that? I mean, I'm looking at your face comparing to here. It's like, all right, if I was him, if I'm in charge of your brain, trying to decide which side to work, which side you cannot decompress. So how would I treat you? To level your body, I have to separate you from that malocclusion that disrupts your nervous system. Remember, proprioception leads to disafferentation, leads to vagal tone go down, fight or flight on, inflammation, everything down the stream. Malocclusion equates chronic disease, low vagal tone. And the funniest part is, interesting, the same tissue in embryo that formed your autonomic nervous system and your endocrine system that are intimately connected formed your dentin, your teeth. Literally, your teeth are the same embryological tissue that is your nervous system and is your endocrine system. Dentists are neurologists and endocrinologists of the highest order. We don't know it until, like me, we go through barbed wires for 5 years to learn that. But when I look at faces and then I turn them around and I look at their necks, let me just go ahead and get rid of the soft tissue here. I'll look at atlas. Any amount of subluxation in the atlas and all the structures that's around it, especially elongation of the stylohyoid ligament and position of the head. And I could tell you, lack of curvature in the neck, position of your hyoid bone, and all the architecture of your airway tells me that no matter how big or small the airway is, it is not able to sustain proper structural support against the negative pressure in exhalation, which means you hold your breath. Holding breath is a response to change in the chemistry in order to regulate your breathing, because this system tells me it's out of order. Now, you have spinal fluid movement issues, which causes sinuses being backed up as well. The deviated septum and inability to breathe out of both nostrils is one of them, because our brain kind of cycles in the nose constantly for a reason. It's how it regulates itself. And when the nervous system is not able to properly get the air channel through one nostril, in your case it's the right nostril, the nervous system is out of balance, which contributes to the overall state of anxiety. So cutting the tissue will not do it, because the face didn't just end up there like that. That's why I want to go back to your history. Dr. Habib, did you ever have any concussion? Did anyone hit you in the face? Were you traumatically born? I mean, I want to know where this came from. You didn't just end up here today.
Yeah, I didn't just. I broke my nose, I think when I was three and a half, with a baseball bat to the nose.
Yep. And that concussive force got transferred through the rest of your skull and distorted a partially back of your skull. And I cannot see quite the back of the skull here. That's a part of the information. And this CT that's missing. Back here is your cerebellum, is your, and that does contribute, because inside of this bony structure is your brain. And then I look at the ventricles and all the spaces where the spinal fluid flows. And when I see stagnancy of the spinal fluid, I see calcification in different areas. That tells me this sewage system, which is the spinal fluid movement, have been backed up for a while. You see how the left side over here, some of the sinuses are packed more. And as I track down and look at the structure, the polypi tissue building up in different parts of the sinuses, especially on that left sinus. Let's go back to it right here. Walking through the nose, right? Is your deviated septum. Yes. So, and also, interestingly enough, your tongue is also uneven, which means the tongue is uneven. Well, can we just address the tongue and give you my functional therapy? Well, wait a minute though. Tongue is like a suction cup that needs to be suctioned to a surface. But you have an uneven surface to suction too, which is your palate. Uneven palate will not, especially in an adult. In a child, it might be a different story because they're still forming. But uneven palate, you cannot. Let me just go ahead and remove my little toggle. You see how there's a gap here? And this is the surface of the tongue that basically is jammed more on the right side than it is on the left side. So, a lot of things that we don't see here on the CT scan is symptoms. And when I walk through the CT, I have the patient's face, posture, and history sitting right here with their pseudomotor testing. And I look at that and I say, all right, I would expect that symptom, because when I'm looking at those conduits of nerve, either you have larger conduits and ability to compensate, or you got the short end of the stick, small conduits, your adaptive capacity runs out because you do not have a wiggle room to move wrong through the space and not constrict the flow even more. So what do? You compensate. And if you cannot compensate, you just lock things up. That's when the sternocleidomastoid upper traps body guards itself in a pitch distortion, because being a three-dimensional human we were meant to be is no longer an option. So what do I see here? Well, I can tell you position of the hyoid bone is pathologically low, which tongue is attached to, and so is the mandible. I see the maxilla orientation is off, and I see that there's a base of the cranium that has a cranial lesion. It's almost like a dent in the middle of the skull. Cervical spine curvature, that's lost. We need to address that by giving the proper order to the face so we can align the neck. The first order of the business in my world, separate you from this malocclusion. So I'm going to go ahead and bring you back here. This part, if you just complete, if I might zoom in just on that, not that I ever do that, but for the time being, this is that crossbite, which means the maxilla is narrower here. The midline is off to the right side. So the body is basically preferring the right side. And for you to be able to sense the ground, you clench more on the left. If you have a TMJ problem, most likely it's going to be on the left side as well in your pattern. But you're overusing the right side of your body, which means if you have any problems with pain, it would be on the right side because you're using it way too much. It breaks down faster, right? Avoidance. First you avoid until the right side breaks. And then now your body has to figure out, how do I continue to compensate? I'll have to pick up a new way of compensation to survive. When you come see me, I don't want you to survive. I want you to get to a full human experience. I want you to sense every part of your body. I want you to breathe through every part of your body as humanly as we can make it happen. I want your brain to get flushed, your hormones to come online, your nervous system to turn back up to vagal tone. Now, sometimes you've lived in that state of chronic state for too long, which means being stuck in a state of chronic sympathetic overdrive. Sometimes just like that car that I drive for a long time with a nail in a tire. You got hit, just let's say that's hypothetically, the only trauma they had incurred was that concussion. Well, at that time, it might just have been the only, but then you had to maladapt around that. And then you have picked up physiological and mental, compensations down the road. So you're not quite functioning properly, dysfunctioning. But we cannot pick those up without addressing the nail that was there, the concussive force. And that's pretty much what my work and my appliances address, is addressing the dura meningeal tissue, the orientation of the skull in the work I do with 3 different chiropractors, with physiotherapy, with reflex integrations that you met today, because the body goes back to brainstem, got to get it back up from the brainstem, get the neocortex running. So your eyes and ears are the most important part as an adult, and getting the tongue to get a chance. Training the tongue, cutting the tongue without addressing the rest of the body, to me, is getting you new tires, because finally somebody found out that, oh yeah, you got a tongue tie. Yeah, it was a flat tire about 35 years ago. Or not a nail in the tire. But now it's an accident, a ding on the car, it's axle problem, it's a suspension problem, tire pads are worn out, all the other tires are worn out. Remember, your right side wearing down more. So when body's overusing the other parts, those parts break down. So now you have 5 other problems, or maybe 10, but they all boil down. So can we just get you new tires? It's pretty much where I kind of tell my patients that come and say, I finally found out the problem was my tongue tie. It's like, what? It's umbrella and rain situation. Do the umbrellas cause rain? No. If you're outside looking in, you would see the problems is much bigger. And I'm so gracious that you let me share this. And I know a lot of folks would actually benefit from this, because they might be living in the same state, and you're spiritually very strong. So you're pouring your bucket more with your vagal tone is getting a lot of its order from the mental state you're in. But imagine there are people that are suffering from all 3 stressors. And I want you to talk about this, because this is an amazing book. It's a very simple read. I love the stressor. And we always go to the things that we can go to the grocery store and address. If I could just get magnesium, get some peptides, and get some antihistamines, and just silence it for now. I feel better. I feel like a human, and continue compensating. Turn off the check engine light because it makes me anxious. But you still got a low pressure tire and a nail in the tire, right?
You're right on point. My entire right side nasal passage is completely occluded. My sinuses are a huge issue. My airflow has always been a bit of a challenge for me overall. You've hit so many points that I never would have known without an assessment of this type.
And we have not even touched on the rest of this. Like, I have barely just walked through it right before our call. I'm like, he can't breathe out of the right nostril. And, I actually kind of tease people, and I say, well, let me tell you a couple of things about you. Because think about it. If your left nostril works better, that means your very analytical brain works better. Emotional side is not as much. And quite the opposite of people that are right nostril works better, and they're emotional wreck. I mean, there are traits, again, there's no science behind this, it's just the Baharism. Because I see people and I see their behaviors. And when your nose go into cycle, because, every 45 minutes, nervous system cycles the nose, each nostril. I have to believe this.
I feel it.
Yes. And when your left nostril goes into cycle, you're going to get anxious. That's why you mouth breathe, and mouth breathing makes you anxious until the cycle comes back off again. And that's when probably you snore at night too, because periodically we snore, right?
Yep. You're exactly on. If I'm on the right side, I need to open up the nostril to allow for airflow to occur. Otherwise, I'm challenged and I'm breathing through my mouth. And that's very challenging to deal with all the time. So I fully, you're exactly on point, and I'm really looking forward to learning about what I can do about it.
You know what? This is why I tell people it's not about the treatment. It's about understanding your dysfunction, removing the kink from your system so it can go back to winding itself back to the state of function and ease. And what we're dealing with is the chronic state of dysregulated nervous system. And we talked almost an hour and a half just to talk about your chronic disease symptomatology. And people come with basket full of symptoms, medical history about inch and a half, if not more. And 10 years, some of them travel the world to see some of the top experts. Some of the basic questions, Dr. Habib, I ask them, they'll look at me like I have two heads. Nobody asked me about my birth trauma. How is that relevant? Well, as far as your brain is concerned, that happened. That happened. Your body has not forgotten that. What you ate for lunch yesterday and who you spoke with, your body kept that score too. And the fact that you're sitting right here in front of me on this Zoom call, your brain is listening to what I'm saying and you just confirmed. So your brain is in agreement with the approach I'm taking. And believe it or not, most of the time, the part that gets missed in translation is that if we talk to our patients and ask them questions and give them the chance to tell their story, 9 out of 10 within that 15-20 minute conversation, they hand over what they need to me. And all I have to do is orchestrate it in a way that gives them a chance to rewind instead of getting stuck even further. It's really that simple, which is why I have such a high positive response to our approach, to our protocols, and my oral appliances help people, is because I don't just go in there and change the mouth. I need to know where the body wants the mouth to function.
Absolutely.
And where did it miss that? And once we give you that opportunity, I have seen septum correction. I have done septum corrections, not to the fullest extent, but the functional and aesthetically too. And it's to me, one of the joys in life is to find your gift, because as humans, we all have a special gift. And this is my gift. And when we shared with humans, for our fellow humans, there's such a joy in this kind of work. And the barbed wires, you and I have a lot of, scar tissues for coming out of the mainstream. But the joy that we experienced and the scenery we saw and the humans we met is beyond.
I love it. What a wonderful conversation. I've learned a ton. I'm hopeful that the people that have been listening have learned a ton. It's so unique to hear this understanding that the structure was built by this autonomic piece, and the autonomic underlying piece, the stressors that you experienced through that developmental phase, played a massive role in how the structure is, and that's why you're functioning the way that you are. This is digging deeper than anything else that I've ever looked at, and I'm so excited.
It's an honor to hear you say that. But Dr. Habib, before we get to the end of this, I'm going to ask you a question.
Of course.
I love your book. Why did you decide to write a second book? And why did you write the first one?
The first one was truly because nobody was talking about the vagus nerve. I needed to get it out to the world. I didn't think there was enough information. I didn't think the information that was out there was accessible enough for people. So I wrote my first book with the idea of it being very, very accessible for everybody, the lay people to get into. The stats on that book speak for themselves. It's done well beyond what I ever expected or thought was possible. And what that means is that basic, simple information resonated enough that it helped support the understanding that people were looking for and promoted their ability to make the change that they were looking for. So that was my initial kind of prompt to get it out, was I just needed people to know how important the vagus nerve was. The second book was because I had more clinical experience.
Yeah.
I had learned from working with hundreds and hundreds of people on improving vagus nerve function. And for some people, the foundational exercises just weren't enough, right? If we're trying to affect positive change in the direction that we're looking for, there are certain other mechanisms, tools, devices, and we live in a time now where the old world knowledge is meshing with the new world technologies, and we can build and create this synergy of optimal health through old world practices, old world wisdom, and new world technology. And so
Mhm.
our capabilities have come up. And so I had learned about new technologies, new devices, new therapies, and I'd used them with my patients and had phenomenal results. And so because of that was my prompt to go to the second book and share more clinical experience, more practical information. And because through those years, I had identified where those stressors truly were coming from and was able to then classify it in a slightly different way, which is what you were mentioning earlier, that we're breaking it down into understanding where those stressors were coming from. So that's why
Yes.
the two books came out the way that they did.
That's
And
fascinating. And, it's motivating me because I've been wanting to write this book for a year. And just recently, the awakening just has heightened because, like you said, one of our biggest teachers are our patients. And the
yeah,
more I do this work, the more holistic, the more whole body approach I take, the less excited I get about the isolated dental part. I helped a lot of people with just the dental aspect and training their tongue. That was my early start. But we all learned from that percentage of people that don't respond and what happened to them. They had a different story I didn't unpack. And the more I see that, in fact, truly umbrellas are not the cause for rain, they're just the common denominator, and every
mhm,
situation becomes a common denominator, we understand that bodies are allowed, and for that matter, the brain demands a compensation when there's a stressor that it cannot keep up with. And we just never take a chance to study and truly understand why this one particular body decided to compensate this way, because no two human on earth are the same. If you allow me, you love my analogies, and I want to give you one that you just cannot forget. This is a human being at one cell at conception.
yes.
There's no notochord, this is one cell. Has all the potential to become an origami. How does the origami form? By stressor form. The stressor comes in and introduces and turn on the signals that form the nice folds, fold here, the 9-month period of time, and then some. We don't we grow a certain amount during gestation, before birth, and then after birth. Every stressor, whether it's mental stressor, chemical stressor, emotional stressors, are stressors that are produced like an origami. So we respond to that like we're forming a vase here to become an origami. The problem is when the stressors are abundant and the body, from the minute that is conceived, the genes that are turned on to form that baby are stress genes, are cancer genes, are survival genes. The baby is formed in dorsal vagal because the amniotic fluid is full of cortisols and drugs and chemicals and stress of the mom, right? Mom's medical conditions, like we know, gestational diabetes, sleep apnea, even gingivitis in mom, is all impacting that baby. Instead of that origami, this is what we get at birth. The stressors, this is already in a compensation mode. Before the first breath, before suckling, swallowing, before the soft food was introduced, it's already in dysfunction.
Yeah.
And then that baby has to now latch, and it can't, more stressor. And that cannot digest, cannot turn their head because it was born traumatically with a forceps. You see how there's more stresses packed into this? And when I see them with the malocclusion, you asked the question of malocclusion, they have, okay, let's just go ahead and straighten the teeth out this one corner. Okay, I made that perfect. What about the rest? With the group approach that we take, we won't tear it apart. We get this, back up. We go back to semi-stage of beginning so we can retrain it. That's what you said, get them out of the state of trauma. And all that's restored in our fascia, and fascia is what's holding us together, conducting our electricity, is directly responsive to our breathing, and breath moves it. So the way we are holding our posture is directly related to the state of our mind, and our breathing and our function is down the stream from that. And I hope this example brings it home for most who do not. When I look at people, I don't get overwhelmed with their symptoms. It breaks my heart to see that some have been in such a state of neuroplasticity, and they're carrying so much mental emotion, the foggy brain, that the orthopedic has just been like a gasoline on fire. And then the more medical wants to help in an isolated, symptom-oriented, sometimes it's more damaging and good. If you're just addressing the mouth without addressing the whole entire system that's misaligned, sometimes the body doesn't have forgiveness for that perfection that we're creating in an imperfect world. So the clashes can induce a lot more stagnancy in the spinal fluid, breathing function. And I personally have observed it as a dentist. I did not know what I didn't know. It's like we all go through this as stages, Dr. Habib. You could vouch for this. We go from the state of ignorance and bliss. We don't know what we don't know. And it's fun because I don't need to know it. I don't know what I'm missing. And not knowing what I don't know, doing really well. Till you understand what you don't know, you kind of upgrade to the state of conscious incompetent. Not quite the same. And then conscious state of incompetence is where we all were when we took that red pill. My profession is not letting me help people. And then we train ourselves. We go sit in different camps of people that don't have our initials and learn from them. You're a chiropractor talking to a dentist. I talked to several different physical medicine, functional medicine providers, took courses from them, sat in their classrooms and treated patients with them. That became the grind state of grind because I wanted to uplift myself from the state of not knowing what I don't know to knowing everything that I need to know. And at some point, like this conversation we just had so easy, it's in your heart as it is in your head and it's in your hand. You don't think about the next patient that's in your chair. You just look at them and saying, here's another new puzzle. And their individual puzzle, let's decode. And once the patients are a partner with you, they understand as well as you do that we just constantly, the first and the last metric that I use to know that you're doing well is your breath and your nervous system. And your brain will pretty much is in charge. And if anything we do can help someone is to change and alter the state of their nervous system back to rest and digest, which means it's a given that we can restore their breath too. It is a given, right? It's like the gas prices. It's like, if everything in the state of economy is well, if the economy is in vagal function, the stock market is in the state of vagal function, then the gas prices should be low. And when the groceries and the gas prices are high, you know something in the stock market is not doing. I mean, that's where vagus nerve to me is the NASDAQ, the ultimate NASDAQ, you know. Right.
It's a great analogy.
Absolutely. I absolutely enjoy this. I know the audience that are listening to this probably are just hungry for more. Dr. Habib, if people want to learn about you, where can they find you? If there's any pearls you want to share with them, what would that be? This is your closing statement. Tell us what you want our audience to hear.
I said it at the beginning and I have to say it again. You can't heal when you're stuck in a sympathetic state. It's not possible. And what we want to do is make nervous system regulation and vagus nerve activation the baseline. So retraining through the breath, through all of these basic foundational practices and utilizing tools when you're stuck in a state that's gotten you into a chronic disease state. Vagus nerve activation is the answer, no question about it, right? And then we can add on the therapies. Then we can utilize the supplements in the right way and utilize the testing in the right way. But if we don't know where that problem is truly coming from, if we don't have that root cause, that for me is where the issues need to be addressed. And that's the starting point. You want to learn more about me, you want to learn more about Health Upgraded is the online community and clinic. So go to healthupgraded.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Dr. Nawaz Habib and check out the books. I think the books are a great intro point for anybody who's really interested in learning about this, getting the basics, getting a footing of what we do when we're working with our clients in the community, in our one-on-one and hybrid support programs. That really is where everything kind of starts. So go check out those few resources that are available. I do have a free 10-day Vagus Nerve Jumpstart mini course for anybody who's interested. I'll send the link over to you.
Yes, love that. I want to get everyone experience what it is to be in a vagus nerve functioning and teaching them about their body. Once you learn how your body works, you get dialed in, you know, the healing power is within you.
Absolutely. I love that.
Thank you again. This was a wonderful, wonderful podcast. And I'm glad I got a chance to actually showcase to you what I do and the ultimate orthopedics that basically is all the alignment of your body is just all that is. So I hope that it was useful for you as well. And if anyone watching, and with that said, thanks again for attendance. Thank you everyone for listening to this podcast. And as always, stay healthy.